Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live in Toronto from Consensus 2025 by CoinDesk. And joining me for this segment, we have Paul Grewal. He's Chief Legal Officer at Nasdaq listed Coinbase. We're here to discuss why regulatory clarity in the digital asset space means that we can foster innovation and how that will help advance the industry. It is great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Great to see you as well, Jill.
Let's talk about some of the challenges that are associated with operating across multiple jurisdictions and regulators in the absence of a federal framework.
Well, Coinbase has had the experience now for over 13 years of operating as a global firm. And we've seen tremendous changes all around the world in terms of how different countries, different governments, different regulators are thinking about the right way to regulate crypto to, yes, of course, protect investors at all times, but also promote innovation. And even just in the last several weeks, you've seen tremendous progress, particularly in Washington, towards legislation. But not only in Washington, we're seeing the conversation move ahead and advance in all sorts of places all over the world. And we're ready for it.
Yeah, and I think especially when you have cohesive policy and a regulatory environment so that companies understand their operating guardrails, that's what's going to continue fostering that innovation and bringing those companies back to the US as well. Because there was some brain drain there for a while.
Well, there's no question about it. Look, crypto's here to stay. In the US alone, we now have 52 million Americans who have bought or sold a digital asset. And I think in countries all over the world, consumers, investors have made it clear they want crypto in their financial future. I think the challenge for regulators is given that demand, given that reality that crypto is here to stay and that investors and consumers want it as part of their set of options, what's the right way to strike the balance between innovation and protection so that people are kept safe while we move the ball forward? And I think we're seeing real progress in that regard.
We certainly have, and even in the past 2 to 3 years, I would say even last year was kind of the inflection point and where you're starting to hear those conversations advancing and the industry, the way that's been advocating, understanding the audience as well, who you're talking to advance this framework.
Well, that audience has changed dramatically. I think that has changed the conversation in turn. The reality was that in the early days of crypto, in the early days of Bitcoin, this was a niche interest of hobbyists, technologists, and folks like that. Now we see mass market interest in crypto and in crypto adoption. Certainly with the incredible success of the crypto ETFs, we've seen a real flood of interest from all sorts of more traditional elements of the market. And I think the conversation around regulation reflects that reality now that we're not just simply talking about a particular slice of the economy that wants this. We're talking about the economy as a whole. And I think that's all positive.
I think it is too. And sometimes we tend to think very US or Western centric, where we have legacy systems that are in place. But the fact of the matter is there's a couple billion people around the world that have leapfrogged, leveraging this infrastructure to grow local microeconomies, alternative forms of capital formation, cross-border payments, e-commerce. That's a big addressable market that we don't want to miss out on and remain and have our leadership position within the global capital markets.
It's so important for the United States to lead on these issues, but it's also important for the US as well as other countries to learn from the successes and even some of the failures of others. It's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to see Consensus here in Toronto this week. 5 million Canadians bought or sold digital assets at this point. And so there are lessons to be learned from other countries that have moved further ahead. And I think it's great to see the United States finally start to catch up in that regard.
Yeah, we have a unique way of formulating legislation here in the US. And sometimes the question is, can we pull elements from the EU Act as an example, or the regulatory framework that they have in Singapore? Do you think some of those elements can be pulled into it or mimic that framework?
Well, I think the United States, like every country, will ultimately have to make its own decisions about the right balance to strike and the right means by which to achieve that balance of promoting innovation and protecting investors. But there are lessons to be learned from Canada, from Australia, from the EU, from countries all over the world. I'm hopeful that even if the particular language and structure of legislation in the U.S. reads differently from other countries, it does reflect an emerging consensus globally that this is an important new technology. It can solve long-standing problems in the traditional financial system, and there is opportunity here if we choose to see it.
Which is interesting because a lot of the conversations here are evolving beyond finance and using the underlying technology in multiple industries. This is the first time that I've been covering Consensus, and it's been almost a decade, that you're starting to hear other industries come into the conversation because, finance has laid the groundwork for that.
Finance has laid that groundwork and has led the way. But I think one of the things at Coinbase that we are most excited about is that investing and financial services and products are just the first steps in this journey towards putting all sorts of elements of our economy on the blockchain and on chain. I do think that you're going to see increasingly more and more of the conversation focus on how can these open networks, how can these permissionless systems support economic activity that go far beyond just buying assets, trading assets, and loaning and borrowing assets. That's where I think the future lies, and we're looking to build it.
All right, Paul, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on
Thank you
Trade
so
Talks.
much.
And thanks for joining me from Consensus. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.